Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.
You are watching Conversations with Jennylyn, and today I have the privilege of interviewing the handsome gentleman sitting with me on my set, Mr. Nicholas Simon. He is the Senior Managing Director at Blackstone Life Sciences here in South San Francisco. And I am very excited and feel very privileged to spend this time with him, looking for enlightenment in all that's going on in the world. And since he's so accomplished, I am sure he has answers to most of our questions, or at least all of them. Mr. Simon, thank you for being so patient. I have to say this. Tell me, with everything going on in the world right now, I would like to start with the coronavirus. There seems to be some mass hysteria. I went grocery shopping last night, 3 different places, and the stores were picked over. Do you want to start with the coronavirus?
Sure. No. Coronavirus, we know a little bit about it because we're in the life science business and we've been investing in vaccines and drugs that treat various viruses. And this is one that has gotten a lot of attention, primarily because of a lot of the uncertainty to it. This is a number of flu viruses, which a lot of people get vaccinated for each year, actually have been coronaviruses in the past. But this is a certain specific type of coronavirus that we haven't seen before, and as a result of that, and it has had a very high infection rate, and unfortunately, a number of these infections, a very significant proportion of these infections, have actually ended up in very serious illness, in some cases, death. Now, the real question is this? A lot of people have been saying, is it a pandemic? In other words, is it something that's being spread throughout the entire world, and hopefully at some point in time will burn itself out? And we just don't know yet, so there's a lot of uncertainty with that. And of course, the main source of this information is coming from the Centers for Disease Control in the United States, as well as the World Health Organization. And God bless them, we need them around, but for all intents and purposes, if there's something that's unknown, they have to raise the red flags and raise them big time. But the one nice part about this is the fact that over the years, over the decades, we have some really good tools in terms of antiviral drugs. You've been hearing about a study that Gilead, just down the street from us here, has actually started a clinical study with some of their antiviral drugs. And then there's a small handful of companies, actually primarily back east, that are in the process of making vaccines. Unfortunately, to really validate how long this is going to be successful is going to take some time, 6 to 12 months at the very least. So we will have those tools in hand. In the interim, best thing to do is listen to what you've been hearing from the CDC. Don't take any unnecessary trips, and whatever you do, wash your hands as much as possible, and try to keep your hands out of your mouth or anything related to your respiratory system.
I noticed that one of the things that disappeared very quickly were the hand sanitizers. You can't find them anywhere. And even sanitizing wipes. I was reading where they're advising to wipe the handles of all public places and not to use your hands to open and close elevators. Do you think this is overreacting?
It's only overreacting to the extent that you don't wash your hands. I think the most effective thing is to wash your hands and do it just like a real doctor does it. If you go to the doctor's office, he spends about 20 seconds really washing his hands, rubbing it, and that kind of thing.
So, apart from the fact that the vaccines we don't have a vaccine as yet, how do you think we're going to control the spread of this, apart from washing hands?
Well, and again, not taking, to only take trips when they're absolutely necessary. And of course, there are certain countries or certain areas throughout the world that really do have a significant amount of the virus around there. So, places in Asia, they've already indicated that they would prefer for people not to come in there. As a matter of fact, they've quarantined individuals there. Italy has been another spot that has been an area where there's been these outbreaks. So these areas of outbreaks you probably want to stay away from as well.
It's a little bit frightening only because in Asia, where it seemed to have started, they've had so many deaths. And because with most viruses, a lot of times you don't know you're infected until it's really taken over.
Yeah.
How does one protect themselves in that situation?
Well, once you're infected, well, first thing you do is make sure you see your doctor. And as soon as you get these symptoms of what were typical flu-like symptoms, and you'll get a bit of, in some cases, it gets to a point where it's a cough because it primarily is an infection of your lungs. And so get to the doctor, and with them, they could try some of these more experimental drugs, these antiviral drugs that have been used for other diseases, other infectious diseases, or in many cases, they'll actually make sure that you have the proper supportive care to ensure that if it does become serious, that it doesn't become life-threatening.
Okay, because there are some people who believe, and I think this is the cause of the hysteria, is there are people who believe that once you get it, you die.
No. It's, again, I think right now the numbers are low single-digit percentage of people that get really sick, and then even a smaller percentage that actually die from that. And that could very well just be related to the fact that we just don't have a good diagnostic test for this right now. So it might just be that we're only really identifying people that actually are infected with the coronavirus after they've actually gotten pretty sick to start out with. But it could actually be, 2 to 3 times, if not 10 times more people that actually have the virus, but just haven't really shown symptoms that are really effective. So it could actually have the same kind of death rate, if you will, or serious infection rate as a traditional flu would have. It's just that our diagnostic tests aren't out there, but that's yet to be proven. So that's why there's a lot of concern about, let's make sure we don't take any unnecessary trips, particularly to areas that have shown to be areas where the infection has really had outbreaks, and really wash your hands as much as possible.
So I don't want to make our interview only about the coronavirus because you have so much to share with us. But I wanted to ask you those questions only because I know amongst many of my friends, they are really seriously scared. And I've had someone call me this morning and say, I have a sore throat. Do you think I should worry? That's why I'm asking you these questions.
Yeah, well, again, if it's a sore throat, that is one of the symptoms of having a flu. So at the end of the day, I think it would behoove them to go ahead and contact their primary care doctor, and he or she could give them a pretty good sense in terms of how serious this might be and whether additional treatment's needed.
Okay. So tell me about Nicholas Simon now that we've shelved Corona. How did you get started, and how did you end up in San Francisco? Because I read in your bio that you were from the East Coast.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I grew up in Maryland, and then actually I went to the University of Maryland as my undergraduate, started and got my degree in this, at the time called microbiology, and this was before they had things called molecular biology and cloning and all that kind of stuff. So back in the dark ages. And then from there, went to the lab and was in the lab for a period of time doing my graduate work. And then from there, I decided that this biotech thing was starting to emerge. This is back in early 1980s. And so there was this one opportunity to come out here with a startup company in Berkeley. And so I picked up the family, moved them out to the West Coast, and we've been here ever since.
And how long ago was that?
That was 1984, so it's a long time ago, yeah.
Wow.
I think they can consider me a native Californian.
I think so, too. Now, you have seen so much happen in that period of time in the medical space. And in addition to everything that's going on, of course, now everyone is scrambling to find a vaccination for the coronavirus. But we have artificial intelligence going on in medicine. Tell me what's the thing that's impressed you the most throughout your career in this field?
Well, probably the most graphic way to describe what's happening in this field is that we're really in the field of making medicines to treat unmet medical needs. If you think about it, before the human genome was sequenced in 2000, yes, the entire pharmaceutical business was based on less than 100 disease targets. That the entire industry, I mean, this is 100 plus years. Since the human genome was sequenced, now we have between 5 and 10,000 targets that we've actually identified as disease targets. And we now have hundreds of new products that are actually going after these specific disease targets. So two things go with that. One is that not only do you have a plethora of new opportunities to invest in, but more importantly is that each of these new diseases, each of these new drugs are targeted to people that can benefit from those diseases, as opposed to before, when you got a drug, in some cases, even with the right doses of the drugs, you had like a 50-50 chance of it even working.
Mm-hmm. And I am aware that investors are very sketchy and iffy about putting their money in the medical field because the results are so sort of unknown, and you hit and you miss with this in this field. Why do you think that we still haven't found a cure for the diseases that have plagued the world from forever, like Alzheimer's, I mean, cancer? I keep hearing there's a cure for cancer, so you can speak to that in a little bit, but why don't you think that we have cures for these diseases?
Well, I mean, again, Mother Nature is a complicated beast, and to fully understand her, it takes many generations to go ahead and do that. But a cure is all relative to taking for example, the area of cancer itself. For the past 150 years, up until about 10, 15 years ago, we really didn't know what the disease, what was really the basis of the disease. You just knew you had this group of cells that formed a tumor, and they just grow uncontrollably. And the only way to really stop them was to either hit them with radiation therapy or just bombard them with these poisons called chemotherapy, or try to yank them out through a surgical resection. But now we found that after the human genome being sequenced, we could go ahead and see what a normal set of genes look like in your body, and then what happens in these cancer cells. And you find out that these normal genes change. They call it mutating. And so now what we do, we have drugs that actually go right after those mutations to go ahead and target them. So that was one of the big breakthroughs that's really almost doubled the life expectancy for people that have cancers. And then much more recently, there's this thing called immunotherapy, which is we're actually targeting our immune system and manipulating our immune system to fight off the cancers. The cancers were actually shutting down pieces of our immune system by sending out a protein that would block their normal function. Oh, okay. And now we're finding drugs that can stop those cancer cells from shutting down pieces of the immune system, so that your immune system can now wipe out these diseases. And the result of that are, again, extending the life expectancy of people that had months to live now to years, and in some cases making them chronic diseases which are considered as cures.
That is really awesome. Now, is this an individual thing? Because all of our bodies are different.
Yeah, the general immunotherapy right now is for a broader population. Mm-hmm. You take it to the next step, which is cutting or bleeding edge right now. We're in the process of actually looking at personalized medicines that are to treat specific types of cancers. Yes. We actually invested in one company called Gritstone Oncology that is going after a specific type of antigen that is for that one specific cancer that you as an individual might have, and making a vaccine out of that. And then with that, the hope is that when you make that vaccine, is that now you'll actually teach your immune system to wipe out all the cancer cells that might be related to your specific cancer.
This is really awesome. What about Alzheimer's and some of those diseases like that? For some reason, I'm blanking. Yeah. It's the one where you shake, Michael J. Fox.
Oh, yeah. So we call it neurodegenerative diseases, but yes. Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's.
Yes, Parkinson's.
So neurodegenerative diseases have been a real challenge. The brain is as complex as most of our body parts are. The brain is probably the most complex. It's really the computer that tells the rest of the body what to go ahead and do. And so we're starting to unfold a lot of those pieces. We've had a couple of misfires where they noticed that you had these plaques in your brains of patients that had Alzheimer's. And we spent billions of dollars going after drugs that go ahead and try to try to treat that specific approach, but that didn't work. They now believe, in a very similar way with cancer, that the immune system now actually has an impact on that whole process as well. So they're looking at both targeting some of the components, the actual structural components that are associated with forming these plaques, but then they're also looking to see how the immune system might have it. But it's still very much in the laboratory right now. A long way to go in that area.
When do you think we can start seeing some, what we may want to say, successful treatments for these diseases? Is there a window of time that
we keep saying this is the decade of the brain. I think the 2020s we will start to see some major breakthroughs in these neurodegenerative diseases. One example is in the area of Parkinson's disease, and they are finding out that this one type of immune cell called complement has a very big impact on it, and we're now going into clinical testing right now in terms of drugs that will manipulate that immune system and hopefully have some beneficial effects on that. Dementia is a little bit more complicated, and so that might take a little bit more work to do, but hopefully they're somewhat related, so that if we have a breakthrough in, for example, Parkinson, that will translate into some of these other neurodegenerative diseases such as dementia and Alzheimer's.
This is really exciting. How is AI? Let's talk about AI. Let's talk about AI in this field.
So the big data is what we call it, but in the management of big data, what we're finding out right now, some of the best ways to go ahead and predict some of these disease targets is to find the genetic basis of disease. And of course, everybody has slight variations within their genes, particularly if they have a disease with it. And so what you need to do is do almost a population genetic assessment to go ahead and see where the differences are for people that don't have the disease versus the people that do have the disease. And with that, you very rapidly go from thousands to millions to billions worth of pieces of data to go ahead and that you have to go ahead and manage. And so what we do, and actually one of the companies I'd mentioned before, this Gritstone Oncology, they actually use AI right now to take a tumor sample out of you. They do they completely sequence, they call it next generation sequencing of that specific tumor. And with that, because they've used thousands of samples before to see what kind of profile they might have, from that they're able to predict that if they take this specific protein or make this specific protein or a small handful of proteins, put it in a vaccine, it should work. And so AI is actually converting all this enormous information, genetic information, translating it into drugs.
That is phenomenal. I think what you're doing is just simply amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. No, it's keeping me off the streets, that's for sure.
Well, you hear about all the different changes that are happening in the world. And I always say, I hope that I'm around when they've got cures for these diseases, and when you have a cell phone that you don't need to charge the battery.
Sorry about that.
I know that's not your field, but I'm looking forward to that. And I believe it's very possible that while I'm still alive, we will have.
Well, I mean, a great example of that is beginning in 1900, our life expectancy of us I think it was like in the mid-40s.
Yes.
I'm in the baby boomer generation. We're expected to live, well, actually, today's life expectancy is in the sort of the mid-80s, and they believe that the people that are being born today will have a life expectancy approaching 100 years. And so that's actually a pretty profound increase, because you think about it, to go from 46 to close to 100 years old just took a little more than a century, where it took 2,000 years. Where you to go back to the actuary tables right after Christ was born, right. The average life expectancy was in the mid-20s, and just to go 20 years to 46, it took them 2,000 years. So it's been a pretty profound impact that science has made on our life expectancy in the past century and a half.
Very true. I just saw the other day that Michael Douglas, Wait, Kirk.
Kirk
Mixing
just
them
died
up.
at 100.
Yes,
or
103
something.
or
Yeah,
105.
Yeah, 4 maybe. Yeah. I can't
And I
remember.
was thinking, now, why do you think someone like that has lived so as long as he has? Do you think it has to do with the fact that he was financially, in a good place to keep himself going, or do you think it has a lot to do with attitude?
Hard to say, but genes obviously play an important role in that, but lifestyle is just as important. They say, particularly if you want a quality lifestyle, it's aerobic exercise is incredibly important to keep dementia away, to keep yourself active, and try to keep the vices at a moderate pace as opposed to going overboard with the vices. But for the most part, that's about all we know at this point right now.
So, a lot of us have grown up to become adults. I think we both are. And I find myself reflecting a lot on my life and wondering, did I choose the correct career path? Am I where I'm supposed to be? Do you ever look back on your life in that way? And when you do, tell me what you think.
Yeah, no, this was a passion I had when I took my first science courses at university, is that I loved the science, and then to be able to see it really advance at such a rapid pace during my career has just been really fortunate. Most fortunate thing is that I've been able to hang around with people that have really been instrumental in terms of really making these breakthroughs, and it's just a wonderful opportunity that was presented to me, and quite frankly, I was really lucky to be able to have the experience I have and be in a position to continue that, at least for the foreseeable future.
Well, I know you mentioned in the earlier part of this interview that initially you were involved in research and development. Are you still very involved in that today?
Oh, no, I was in the lab, but they threw me out in a hurry. I went on the business side of things. Yeah, so no, I'm more on the business side of a lot of this biotech stuff and everything else. But research and development, my colleagues are the ones that are really do the heavy lifting there. I'm just the one who finds the money and puts it in, and really which enables them to go ahead and advance those researchers. So I'm more of an enabler. I'm not really in the trenches that are actually doing the testing of the drugs and discovering the drugs and that kind of stuff.
How then do you select the groups or the companies that you're willing to invest in? What's the criteria?
Yes.
For anybody watching this who may have an idea that they think they may want to come to you with.
Yeah, so it's great science. We initially started in the venture side where we needed great science and really wanted to really understand what we needed to do to get it validated. In many cases, it's validated initially in humans. More nowadays, what we've been primarily focusing our investments on are more the last stage of what they call clinical development, right before approval for drugs, where you've already had hundreds of patients treated with it, and we find the money. It's usually hundreds of millions of dollars per drug that we will go ahead and invest to get it approved. And then once it's approved, at that time, it's usually readily accepted by the entire medical community.
So you come on board when it's safe.
Well, yes, exactly. We've passed the safety hurdles, and it's in the last stage least riskiest, but in the same respect requires the largest amount of money to do it. Usually between $100 and $500 million per project.
Do you feel, though, even though at this stage of the game, have you invested in some companies that didn't quite work out the way you had hoped?
Yeah, I mean, there's Mother Nature. I mean, we had a collaboration with a company over in Israel, actually, for a drug to treat Tourette's syndrome, which is these uncontrollable tics that particularly these children have. And we had plenty of data. It was actually approved for other similar type of disorders, but we did the studies, and as it turned out, the drug just didn't work quite as well in that situation. And so that situation, we lost a lot of money. We lost our money on that one. But when it is successful, we actually make a fair return on this as well.
I was just going to say, I'm sure the next company paid off for the loss on that one.
Yes, well, we just had an announcement this morning that one of our companies was just bought out by Gilead for about $4.5 billion. And so, again, if you can show some good, solid clinical data to validate it, there's a huge need for it, and it translates into a big valuation.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
I know people have concerns with AI, because with every good thing, there's a downside. In your field and in the companies currently that are part of your establishment, have you had any concerns or with any of the drugs that you're working on?
In terms of data privacy and that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, it's, there's competitive elements behind it. Another aspect behind it is when our business is very much dependent on intellectual property protection, patent rights, and if it gets in the wrong hands before you've actually gotten that protection, that becomes a problem. And then when we're actually doing the clinical studies with people, these consent forms and their privacy issues, that becomes a big thing. So there's a lot of heavy-duty restrictions and regulatory components that we put behind it in protocols to ensure the safety of that data.
Wonderful. Well, as always, when I'm learning all the genius of someone that I'm interviewing, the time flies, and we're almost out of time. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you would like to leave with people watching this interview?
No, it's just, I think the one thing I would say is that we've been talking about the age of medicine for decades now, ever since the biotech industry was originally established. We are finally here now. Again, we have these incredible innovations that are happening every day, and we can finally say with great credibility that we have a lot more coming down the road, which won't necessarily be a cure, but will hopefully turn terminal illnesses into chronic diseases.
Why do you think we've come here now? What is the difference with now and the past? Because that's something I've been thinking about a lot. Every time you go to LinkedIn or you pick up the newspaper, you hear something phenomenal, these huge breakthroughs in the medical world. Why do you think this wasn't happening before?
Yeah, again, it goes back to the really understanding the genetic basis of disease. When we sequence the human genome, that sort of opened up Pandora's box, and now we're starting to understand what's in it.
Why didn't we do it before?
We didn't have the tools, but now we have the tools. Before, it used to cost, to take one person's, to fully sequence one person's genome, it cost millions of dollars before this was done. Now that there are new techniques, new machines to do it, you can do it for less than $1,000. So we can sequence everybody's genomes now. So it's just a lot of technology breakthrough that's happened over the past decade or so.
This is so awesome. I'm really grateful to be in the world while this is all happening. And before we wrap up this interview, I wanted to tell you, thanks to you and all the people that you work along with that are causing these breakthroughs, because I've lost a lot of dear friends that, if they were around today, would still be here. And I'm really excited to see what is going to happen. But before we go, do you think we will have a vaccination for the coronavirus in 18 months like they're predicting?
Oh, yes. No, I think a couple of companies within a matter of literally weeks of hearing about this coronavirus were able to actually put together the components of a vaccine. The only thing we're really waiting on right now is to make sure that the actual format that they put in that vaccine can actually generate the right kind of immune responses to do it. So we got the tools ready to go, we just haven't validated them yet. And the reason we're holding off making them generally available is because we want to validate them, and it'll take about a year to do that.
Oh, a year, not 18 months like people are saying.
Well, it could be as early as a year, but I think with a matter of expectations and everything doesn't always go like clockwork, let's give ourselves a 6-month buffer. So let's say within 18 months.
Well, fingers crossed, and hopefully we don't have too many fatalities here in the U.S. while we wait. And very sorry for the countries who've lost so many people to date.
All too true, absolutely.
Well, Mr. Simon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny. It was certainly a
I
pleasure.
really enjoyed this, and I hope that you have provided answers for some of the questions. Hopefully I asked the questions that will bring the answers to the table that people are looking for.
No, it's an exciting time, and thank you so much for having us.
Thanks you once again for watching Conversations with Jennylyn. I hope you will enjoy this interview as much as I did, and I will see you next time.
Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.